Today is Tuesday, August 4th, 2009. I'm Jason Howell.
I'm Natalie Del Conte.
I'm Molly Wood.
And I'm Tom Merritt. Welcome to Buzz Out Loud, CNET's podcast of indeterminate length, episode 1033. Our first of two episodes today, because we have a couple of special guests with us today, as we have promoted Federal CTO Aneesh Chopra is joining us. Thank you very much, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming on the show. Appreciate you sending us little well wishes for our 1,000th episode. And I know you have a busy schedule, and so we really appreciated you coming in and taking some questions from us and the audience.
Yes, sir.
Also joining us from Craigslist, Craig Newmark.
Hey, glad to be here. This is Aneesh's show, though. I'm just here as a kind of a camp follower.
That's good. We are very happy to welcome you to Buzz Out Loud. Like I said, we've got a bunch of questions, so let's get into it. I'm going to start with my own, which is just kind of the general question. Your exact title, as I understand it, is Associate Director for Technology of Science and Technology Policy, but they call you the Federal CTO. And we have the federal CIO, we have the FCC, we have the cyber czar who just stepped down yesterday. Where do you fit in all of this new technology-focused policy?
Well, thank you for asking the question. My title is actually more complicated than that. I'm actually Assistant to the President and Chief Technology Officer and Associate Director. The reason why that's relevant is that the President had made it very clear when he campaigned and as he transitioned into governing that we as a nation need to harness the power and potential of technology and innovation across a wide range of disciplines on healthcare, on education, on our energy strategy. So my role is to provide both advice to the President on how best to take advantage of the capabilities, but also to make sure that we are incorporating near-term strategies inside the government that will move the ball forward. How do we bring emerging capabilities into Washington more thoughtfully?
And then how closely do you work with Federal CIO Vivek Kundra on this, and where do you guys differ?
Well, Vivek is largely responsible for the IT governance. The federal government spends nearly $76 billion on IT, and we have within the Office of Management and Budget a clear vision for running that more effectively and efficiently. Vivek is responsible for making sure that we make the right policy decisions on the consumption of technology inside the government. We work together in what we're referring to as our management C-suite. We have a chief performance officer, we have a chief technology officer, and a chief information officer. The three of us are essentially working together to demonstrate how we can make government more effective, incorporating new technologies, running what we do better, and assigning long-term outcomes goals so that we can measure performance.
Now, with the cyber czar stepping down yesterday, how are we going to go about filling that role? What is the government looking for? Can you comment a little bit about that?
Let me begin by saying that Melissa Hathaway has been a phenomenal resource to the federal administration. She's been terrific on a personal level. I'm sad to see her stepping down, but she's been working 24/7 for the last several months, and I'm very supportive of whatever she chose to do. The President has made this a top priority in the administration. In May, he announced a significant strategy in this regard. We built in the White House essentially three teams that will focus on this issue. A coordinator that makes sure that we're getting the right policies done at the long-term level, but then to have two other aspects of it. I'm responsible for our engagement with the private sector, namely around our critical infrastructure, banking, energy, healthcare. My colleague Vivek Kundra is responsible for the use of principles of cybersecurity in the federal government itself. So we as a team continue to move forward. It's unfortunate Melissa will step down, but we will hopefully have named a new coordinator in the not-too-distant future. The work is continuing to get done. There are operational issues as well as strategic issues that will continue forward with the team in her absence.
So where does that put you in line for the presidency then? Because it would be Obama and then Biden and then Pelosi, and then where are you in this line?
Oh, nowhere near. We are simply advisors to make sure that we've got the right information to make the best decisions for the country.
All right, good to know.
All right, let's move on to the broadband infrastructure, because I know that's a hot topic. Molly, you've got the question.
Yeah,
there.
I was wondering,
Yes.
just from a policy perspective, obviously I'm sure you can't tell us that you're going forward with this, but do you feel, and are there discussions about, at this point, the digital divide and whether internet access, particularly broadband internet access, should be a utility, should be something that every American needs in order to stay competitive and is entitled to? And is that something that the government would consider, regulating and taking over?
Well, let me begin by saying the President's been absolutely clear that broadband access for all Americans is critical to our global competitiveness. Mm-hmm. I will be thoughtful in saying that the regulatory question is really one that the Congress is tasked to the FCC, which is essentially an independent body. We work very closely with Chairman Janikowski, he's a dear friend, and we are tasked together in developing a national broadband plan. That is due in February of 2010. That is led by Chairman Janikowski, and we are contributing in a thoughtful way following the rules that are set out. I'll make this observation. My focus in this area is that there's essentially two themes that emerge. One is innovation in the supply. That is, how do we bring lower cost capabilities so that all Americans can afford broadband? But there's also an equal interest, if not more so on my front, on driving innovation in the applications space. So the more we deliver better applications that demonstrate value to the American people, I think the faster we're going to see the closing of the digital divide. Just take example, cell phone penetration. We have more cell phones in this country per household than washing machines. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing if the applications are there and of use, then they're going to be adopted. What share of the global internet traffic is YouTube? One application. What is it? 3 to 5% of the network traffic. So if we focus our efforts on balancing, driving more innovative applications as well as bringing down the cost of the supply, we hope we can make an impact.
Well, I got a phone that has lots of great applications on it, but I can't use it half the time because I don't have the access. That's just one carrier, so
And that was going to be my follow-up. Yes. Basically, do you feel like that access is there? That access to internet to internet, that access to internet access, kill me.
Well, great,
but is available to people the way that it should be, and that you said you interface with the private sector. Do you feel like that competition is happening so that people have the right options?
I must say this. We are in a very interesting time. Pre-iPhone, the average smartphone was still majority voice traffic. I think it was something like 70% of the traffic on the smartphones were still voice. Mm-hmm. iPhone is majority data. And so we're starting to see the cell phone market essentially as a connectivity play to the internet, where we had thought about that years back when carriers invested in data networks, but now we're actually seeing it. It is in that context that we celebrate Chairman Janikowski's work recently to actually ask the questions in that example of the recent actions in Apple with respect to their work with Google Voice. These are questions that need to be asked, and we celebrate the fact that we're doing it. Our commitment to ensuring access to the internet is not limited to the wired world versus the wireless. It's about the broader question of how does one get connected. And I think if you look at continued innovation, everything in the home is going to be connected to the internet. My new TV that I bought thanks to the CNET how-to videos has a connection. So is that an internet access device, and how does it allow for competition? These are great questions we're going to be grappling with.
And one of the things we talk about on Buzz Out Loud a lot is the fact that the United States is consistently ranked low as far as broadband penetration, broadband access. What can we do? Do we know what we can do yet to boost that up, to get us up there in the top 5 where people are not frustrated all the time, oh, my internet went out, or I don't have enough bandwidth, all that sort of thing?
Well, the first question is, does this nation have a broadband strategy? Mm-hmm. All the other countries in the world that are serious about this issue have, and we should have done this years ago. So I applaud the Congress. Obviously, the President's been calling for this. We will, by February 2010, have a framework that allows us to get into this question. I'm less focused on the benchmarking of broadband penetration because we might quibble about the per capita designation and whether that's an accurate way of measuring widespread adoption, and I'm more interested in, are we using the technology to deliver value to society? Is it helpful to us in our personal lives? Is it advancing our healthcare agenda, our educational strategy, and so forth? I'm focused on the verb as much as I am the noun, which is, do we in fact have someone buying a particular connection? The verb part is what's occupying my time. To what end are we using it, and are there policy barriers that we need to get out of the way to drive more usage? That's the focus.
It seems like standardization is such a barrier to policy right now, and it seems like the EU has their act together in terms of standardizing, especially the mobile market, all the way down to just standardized chargers. Where are we in the standardization?
You guys, I was listening to your episode about the Japanese chargers. That was maybe a month ago.
Yeah. Universal chargers.
Come on. With all the cards that I have, believe
me. Make that a law or something.
Listen, I from my vantage point, in terms of the role that I play, engaging on standards is clearly one of the leverage points to make an impact. There's obviously a desire to continue the innovation, the spirit of innovation in this country to drive private usage. But where appropriate, we will try to bring people together and collaborate in the adoption of standards. We're doing this in healthcare IT. We're doing this in the energy grid. We want to continue to push. You raised the right questions, Natalie. It's one that's been, on a personal level, baffling. Why are we having a tough time? But there's thoughtful reasons as to where we are and how we got here. The National Broadband Plan by the FCC will help us get real deep on that issue.
Okay, well, you mentioned healthcare. Let's move on to our next question. We have coming from Dr. Carl. He wants to know about your previous mentioning of health IT as a top priority. He says, as a doctor, the effective rolling out of a cohesive EMR system is something we have all been keeping an eye on, as the utter lack of cohesion, even within hospitals, is readily apparent. To that effect, do you plan on supporting the distribution of a single EMR system countrywide? If so, would you recommend the current VA LIS system, or would you support a private effort such as Google's? Would such integration be mandatory or voluntary? If mandated, what kind of timeline seems feasible? So we'll leave it at that because that's like six questions in
That's
one.
great. What a powerful policy
EMR,
question.
by the way, electronic medical records.
Yes.
Thank you, Molly.
Yes. Let me begin by saying this. We have a more fundamental challenge in our healthcare system. That is, we reward the sickness and the response to sickness. And the president's been absolutely clear that we need to focus our policy priorities around prevention and wellness. This is an important question before we get into the purpose of health IT, because, again, if you think about the noun versus the verb analogy, we have nouns. You can go to the store, buy some software, and show me a receipt and say, see, I bought something. But to what end am I using it? Today, most physicians and hospitals use technology to improve billing, to be very frank. Mm-hmm. They're not incented to use it to communicate with patients to keep them healthy. How many physicians get paid today by keeping you healthy with an e-visit? This is not part of our policy framework. So it's obvious, therefore, there hasn't been as much product innovation to support the market because the market doesn't really know what it wants the technology to do. The president's been so clear we will shift the focus to wellness and prevention through health reform that if we're successful in that vision, I'm confident there will be a widespread activity on innovation for new products and better products, because that's what people are going to want. If e-visits are part of our strategy going forward and other related examples, you're going to see people saying, how can I proactively text message you to make sure that if you're a pregnant mom and we're worried about the infant mortality rate in this country, we might text message you more frequently to make sure you're doing the right things to keep your child in the womb healthy. That's a different world today. And so that's what I'm hoping for, driving product innovation around the healthcare outcomes goals that our president's been so clear about.
And then are you the person that has to deal with whether HIPAA will allow a doctor now to text message you, or are you going to email about those things? Because there's it seems like there's a huge policy barrier to communication that, I've literally had conversations with some doctors about how I want to email with them.
Yes.
And they say HIPAA prevents me from ever emailing you anything. And, I think there's some pretty big policy challenges you have to overcome before you can even get to technology.
This is precisely why the Congress and the President have set up a Health IT Policy Committee. I have the honor of serving on the standards body that addresses this issue. And embedding security and privacy principles, which really are the byproduct of why we had the HIPAA legislation in the first place, are key to getting this right. We're going to be engaging on this issue between now and the fall. There's a term you may not be as aware of, but the two words that are going to drive healthcare IT moving forward are meaningful use. What that means is that the Congress has set aside billions of dollars to help physicians adopt technology if they become meaningful users of the technology to improve healthcare. So the debate right now is, when we regulate the definition of meaningful use, will security and privacy provisions be incorporated, and if so, how? That is a regulatory review process. We'll comment on that as that process unfolds this fall and into the winter.
All right, let's move on to something that probably is a little more in the FCC's bailiwick, but
here you are.
Ken Weisner wanted to ask you this. While I understand the FCC is currently investigating wireless open access and handset exclusivity, and that it may not be appropriate to comment on these investigations, my question to Mr. Chopra is, how does the Obama administration view net neutrality with regard to the mobile product and service space in general? And do you believe that it is the role of government agencies, such as the FCC and FTC, to regulate mobile application stores like the App Store to ensure equal footing for developers and to promote consumer choice?
Let me take the second question first, and I'll go to the first. I do not envision the federal government regulating the App Store. It is not a network carrier.
We want you to bring Google Voice back into the App Store.
Having said that,
I don't think that's your job.
No, appreciate the sentiment. But the broader question is a very thoughtful one. The president has been absolutely clear that in this country we have benefited greatly from the openness of the Internet. In fact, when we announced our cybersecurity strategy, the president said that we have benefited greatly and that our efforts to protect the nation's private networks will be driven by more collaboration and less government control and ownership. So we've been very clear on these principles. In fact, the funding announcement that went out on our broadband stimulus grants have embedded these principles in how people apply for the grants. That is, that there should be non-discrimination principles as well as interconnection features. So we've been very clear in the past on these issues. Whether it's wireless or wireline, I said to you earlier, the point is the outcome, connection to the internet. And so I would presume, as we unfold our framework for these issues, that whether it's wireless or wireline, we will basically think of the internet as a tool, however you access it, and ensure that our principles of openness and innovation will continue as core foundations moving forward.
Do you think that the best way for us to get a good open end-to-end internet is through some legislation or through fostering competition?
You know, it's a great question, and I know that the congressional folks have constantly engaged on this. In fact, a bill recently was dropped on the same issue. My focus is on the here and the now, which is how do we spur, through collaboration, the kind of innovation we're looking for. And again, if there's some basic building blocks of innovation, right? Having a secure and smart network infrastructure is critical to achieving our goals in banking and healthcare, you name it. So I'm working very closely with the private sector to see how we might work together. In fact, a week after the president called on our cybersecurity framework, I joined Melissa, who just made the announcement. We visited New York City and met with 20 or so of the most senior leaders in the banking sector's IT. Together we could collaborate on cybersecurity, and it'll be supportive of the network carriers, that is, working together to find solutions. This doesn't always have to be through legislation or through regulatory frameworks. We could get there if we work hard at it.
Plus, I just want to have more choices. I mean, that's the biggest thing. How do we arrive at that where I'm not stuck between, well, it's either cable or DSL, and that's all I got.
Or worse,
I
I'm in the middle of nowhere and it's dial-up. Period.
Yeah.
You know, or maybe some terrible kind of satellite broadband thing.
I tell you, this is one of the key reasons why the question of unserved and underserved has been the thrust of our modest investments in the broadband infrastructure to date. Having come from Virginia, we most certainly saw the impact on our rural communities. I would argue that if you live in rural America today, access to broadband is not, if not number one, is number two on your priority set to be competitive in the global marketplace.
Mm-hmm. All right, speaking of technology and connectivity, I have a question about education. And this is a good one for you since you pioneered the Virginia e-textbooks. What is the real picture? And this actually comes from me, not from a viewer. What's the real picture in terms of public education and technologies? And do most schools have technology that will actually prepare them for the workforce? Because for most people, connectivity is still sort of a matter of convenience. But for students, connectivity is imperative for their chances at upward mobility. So how much do you work with the educational system?
Very closely. I had the honor of testifying in Congress on the future of learning. My main theme was that we have to think of the educational space the way Congress did on healthcare, which is it's about the meaningful use of technology. I must tell you how disappointing it is when I go to visit a school that's adopted a laptop per child program, but then turns off every feature of the machine that would be useful for them in the real world because of concerns. So the challenge for us, Natalie, is that we have investments in technology. In fact, the president has in the economic stimulus plan $650 million in funding to support the adoption of technology in our schools. The challenge is, are we doing them for the right reasons and to pursuing the right ends? I am working very closely with the president's team in education, and most specifically Jim Shelton, who runs the Office of Innovation, to coordinate a plan for education technology moving forward, and more importantly, to experiment. You know, a lot of what I do, and we're going to engage on in the first half of this discussion, has been really about kind of policy goals. But I keep myself at night worrying about the other half of the equation. What do I deliver in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? So not everything requires a law or a policy change. We can deliver and demonstrate value in the here and the now, and it is that spirit that is pushing me to think of questions like education technology. What does the fall look like when, God forbid, H1N1 returns in a manner that puts children out of school for an extended period of time? We're actively engaged on the question, what is the alternative? And how does technology play a role to make sure that we get those kids still continued to learn? There's a continuity of learning plan, if you will, we're focused on these issues because we have to, and that doesn't wait for new laws and policy.
And are you literally in a position to send guidance to America's schools and say, like, look, the way you're managing technology operations at these schools is absolutely ludicrous, and you're keeping kids in the technological dark ages? Because the emails that we get from kids in school today are just ridiculous. They may as well be using the same sort of word processor terminals that I was using, because they, like you said, they have been so, the machinery itself, the functionality has been so crippled that, kids are getting kicked out of school for taking a USB stick from one computer to the next.
It's.
Can you just email them?
Yeah,
don't do that?
and not so much. But we Jim Shelton and I did speak at the Education Technologies Conference just a few weeks back, and we hit home this message. We have to be respectful of our federalism, our system of federalism, which is that schools are largely governed by local districts. They make the decisions. States play a role, and the feds do a little bit in terms of funding and the No Child Left Behind provision. So working in that ecosystem and finding the right leverage points to engage, obviously a key part. We're in the middle of the National Education Technology Plan effort. Mm-hmm. These issues are going to come right up.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to social networking and, of course, cybersecurity, which we're sort of dancing around. What is the administration's guidance on balancing? This question comes from Cyberman 375. Cyberman. What is the administration's guidance on balancing the emerging capabilities of social networking and the security constraints? Some issues seem to be easy, such as banning the use of peer-to-peer file sharing on government computers. Others, such as restricting the use of Twitter, would remove what is becoming an important tool for policymakers to communicate directly to people. So given that using Twitter, Facebook, and the like puts some security and operational readiness concerns into non-government hands, how seriously can the government afford to move services into depending on social networking as a major form of communication?
This goes to your question about the role of the CTO and the CIO. We collaborate on how we bring emerging technologies into government itself. I must say, one of the more frustrating aspects of visiting in Washington when I took the role was just to see how limited we are in the use of technology in our personal professional lives, meaning my bandwidth was extraordinarily, I had better bandwidth on my iPhone, to be very frank, even though you struggle with that
impressive.
here. Well, it tells you how sad it was in Washington. It's getting a little bit better, but the reason there is anxiety is that there's not a lot of upside for folks who adopt these technologies today. Craig's been a real champion to inspire the web managers in Washington. They don't get a lot of attaboys and attagirls for adopting these technologies. If they have one incident that jeopardizes one of our policy goals, the downside way outsizes the upside. Our job is to provide a safe place for the agencies to adopt these technologies. So we're not ready to announce it yet, but you can rest assured that the CIO and I are working closely at provisioning secure access to these Web 2.0 capabilities so that they can be thoughtfully used and be respectful of our true restrictions on security.
Well, and I guess the other question to that end is, do you see them as truly useful? On the one hand, they're wonderful tools for communication, for real-time communication. On the other hand, they're havens for trolls and script kiddies. Is it like, do you think that you will get to the point that some celebrities have gotten to on Twitter where you say, you know what, this isn't worth our time, actually?
And that's what the U.S. Marines just decided this week, that they've put a 1-year ban on any social networking for any Marine.
It's a fascinating question. Again, noun, verb. The noun is whether or not you open up a Twitter account. Okay, in and of itself doesn't really do anything. It's nice to do. It's not a must-do. But if you think about the verb, I'm going to tell you one story. Again, in the spirit of delivering value in the here and the now, the President on June 25th announced that myself, the CIO, and our Chief Performance Officer are partnering with the Citizenship and Immigration Service. Why? In 90 days, we're going to turn that agency around and make it more customer-friendly. Mm-hmm. For the first time, we will allow you, like Burger King, to have an information update on your application your way. Would you like a text message alert? Would you like an email? Would you like to visit online and be able to check where you are in the queue and then to benchmark how long you have to wait in that queue against others in the same category? And then to demonstrate how one field office compares to the other. This is a sea change in thinking. In 90 days, with no incremental budget, we're going to turn on a more citizen-facing capability using emerging, text messaging you might think of as yesterday, but from our standpoint, wow, do you know how many people are scared waiting when they apply for immigration? not knowing what to do. They call their congressman to ask on their behalf. They hire lawyers to just ask basic questions. To have us be public and available in that information, it's using the technology in a verb to demonstrate meaningful value against a policy objective.
A final question, because we know you've got to get out of here. You've got a busy day ahead of you. Kevin Dupuis on Twitter asked, with the huge deficit, why doesn't the federal government switch to proven open source tech like SUSE or Red Hat instead of Windows? The big fat question.
I defer to the chief information officer who regulates our $76 billion in spend, of which that's
You told him about it, though, right? You were like, hey, there's all this open source stuff.
I'll make one small comment about open source, and I'll move on. As a policy priority for me, I care much more about the principles of open collaboration and the sharing of intellectual property as we build value. So what does that mean? If I'm buying a house and I want to develop a mortgage calculator to help me figure out what to do, you might, as a neighbor of mine, build one on Excel, but you'll share it with me. Mm-hmm. I don't care if Excel is the proprietary platform upon which you wrote that intellectual property. I care that you shared the mortgage calculator. Too little in government is shared intellectual property from agency A to B, and that's my policy priority. That can be embracing the spirit of open collaboration on a proprietary stack like Oracle or Microsoft, but it could also be introducing open source.
You could use OpenOffice to share your mortgage calculator.
You don't want to use that.
But I appreciate the sentiments. But that open collaboration and sharing of intellectual property in advance of public policy is a priority for me.
Craig, we haven't let you get a word in edgewise. Do you want to throw out something, ask a question before we close out?
As we wrap up.
Well, pretty much what I just do is bear witness. There's a lot of good people in Washington doing a lot of good work right now, and hardly anyone knows about it. We now have leadership which is committed to serving the public well. There's a lot of line workers in web and related technology who are ready to go, and oddly enough, they're actually getting stuff done already. And, the best thing I can do is bear witness to it.
Well, thanks very much for coming along. Aneesh, thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, wait,
to
can I ask
talk
my
to us.
digital voting question
Yes.
before I let him go? Please.
Yes.
This is my one big question that I want
Yes.
is, will we ever be able to vote reliably and securely online?
There are committees right now looking at that question, and I've been asked to be engaged on the issue, so I will dig deeper. But the use of technology to improve our voting experience, we did in Virginia. We partnered with the Pew Charitable Trust and Google through the Voting Information Project to make accessible the information on where to vote. So it's a start, Natalie. It's
Yep.
not ultimately doing the actual transaction, but my hope is that we'll have a thoughtful debate about this in the coming months.
Good. Get on that, please.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
And to your audience and to your listeners, I'll make one final plea. Continue to innovate. Your country needs you. Develop applications and services that will help us improve our healthcare system, our energy system, and our educational system. If you come up with great ideas, let me know about them, and we'll try to demonstrate them as much as possible across the country. Because while we wait for Washington to pass laws and rules, we look to your inspiration and the benefits you all make to make a difference in people's lives. And I thank you for what you do.
And how do people let you know about them?
Well, they can definitely visit me at whitehouse.gov/open, where we have a running blog for our Open Government Initiative, which is a policy priority for my office. And they can blog on that site if they wish. They can visit ostp.gov, which is where I sit, and we have a blog there. In fact, I'll have a blog post going on later today. So we'll engage in any which way possible.
All right.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
for coming in.
You
This
can
was
find
very exciting for us.
all the links to what we talked about at our blog, bol.cnet.com, and there'll be a second episode with the news of the day in your feed as well.